Patriots lose to the Indianapolis Colts 27-17. This was a 20-0 game. Patriots rallied to make it respectable, but really played like absolute trash. Pretty much all three phases of the game. You can throw the coaches under the bus too for 3/4 of this game. Some empty calories here in the fourth as they came back and, as we said, made it close. But Evan, let's start at the end here. As you said, you and I were just talking offline. This was as pissed off and sullen and sulky and moody as Bill Belichick has been in a long time with this game, and not taking anything positive out of it at all.
Yeah, we asked them some questions about trying to spin some positives, some moral victory, if you will, into this game. And I think we're at the point of the season now for Bill Belichick where we're in week 15 and the time for moral victories and the time for treating Mac with kid gloves, saying, oh, well, he played terribly for 3/4, but he brought them back. And that's a really good sign. That's a really good thing to look at moving forward as a foundational piece. Bill Belichick wasn't having any of it. I asked him about the run defense. First, I asked him what happened on the 67-yarder. Didn't want to talk about it. Then I asked him, well, how did you feel about how the run defense did against Jonathan Taylor outside the 67-yarder? Because they held Taylor in check for most of the game. He had 28 carries for 103 yards outside of the 167-yard touchdown. So he said that including the 225 yards rushing, which I thought the Patriots kind of game plan to concede a little bit on the ground here in this game, Bill wasn't having that either, right? No, the 225 yards rushing was too much also. So didn't play well, didn't coach well, didn't play a winnable game with the turnovers and the penalties and the blocked punt. This was a angry, pissed off, dejected Bill. And I think the one thing that you also have to look for to wrap up this point is the coach on the other side. Right. I think it's absolutely driving Bill nuts that he can't beat Frank Reich. And they beat him a few years ago when Reich had Andrew Luck in 2018 when he first got to Indianapolis. But to not be able to beat Frank Reich in the Super Bowl a bunch of years back, and then to get beat by the same scheme again here tonight where your defense really was overmatched for a lot of this game, I think that was another sticking point for Bill, that just from a coaching standpoint, from his standpoint, the X's and O's, the frustration coming out that Reich seems to have him figured out on the offensive side of the ball, even though the defense I thought played really well in this game for the most part.
Relatively, I think what killed them is just the way too many yards on first down. Made it easy for the Colts. I think that was a huge problem there. And again, you know where their strength is. The interior of that offensive line is what it is. I mean, and they're going to do that, and they're going to bully you. But you're right. At the end of the day, when you looked at the stats, minus, a couple gadget plays and the 67-yarder, they did an okay job on Taylor, well within reason to have won the game. Again, you eliminate that 67-yarder, and if they won it, you would have actually pointed to their ability to have kept, Taylor relatively in check. But it's just all of the other stuff was just so bad. And what I don't understand is just, we're talking defensively, what ended up happening with them being able to run, an X, Y, and Z. But from your perspective, offensively, did you like what the Patriots came out doing here? I was a little confused by it.
Yeah, I thought early in this game, some of the play calling was definitely a little bit peculiar, odd, whatever word you want to use to describe it. The toss play on third down and some of the other outside runs that they tried to run early on in this game were really head scratchers, because when you look at this Colts defense, you see a lot of speed. Right,
they're fast.
There it is, one of the most athletic players in the league at that position.
So why are you trying to beat them to the edge with Brandon Bolden? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. That's one of those things that on Tuesday when we talk to Josh McDaniels, hopefully we can get some insight. Hopefully we can get some answers as to why they did that and why they felt that was the best way. Because I really felt like coming into this game, the two advantages the Patriots had were to throw the football, which they ended up doing pretty effectively on the whole, outside of the two interceptions. When you look at, when you look at max production, especially when you look at like expected points added and stuff like that, to be almost a net positive in EPA despite throwing 2 picks tells you that on all the other plays you did pretty well.
He made some really good throws.
Yeah, he made some throws down the field and was able to move the offense. But you talk about 1 for 4 in the red zone. in this game. You talk about some of the situational play calling, and those are two things that in my mind, when you go to red zone and when you go to third and fourth down, those are when coaching truly comes out in game plan X's and O's, right? When you talk
Yeah,
about from a big picture standpoint, building an offense, developing Mac Jones, Josh McDaniel's done a great job on all of those fronts all year long, right? He's brought Mac along. He's gotten them into a good groove offensively from a structure standpoint. But when red zone, third and fourth down, that is when creativity, that's when, game plan wrinkles come into play. And I know he took a little bit of a shot at Bill Belichick in his post-game press conference, but Frank Reich calls the Naeem Hines touchdown the Patriots special. That's what he called it in the post-game press conference. That's a little bit of a game plan wrinkle. Now, the Patriots had the one hand off to Jonnu Smith that gets called back by the holding penalty, but the lack of, I would say, creativity and usage of other people besides Hunter Henry in the red zone is really killing the Patriots. When they get down there inside the 5, they want to bully ball it. I know on third down, Mike Onwenu jumps off sides, and that false start penalty probably took away Ramondre Stevenson run up the gut. Right, that was probably when they brought the
sure.
6th offensive lineman. That's probably where they're going with it. But it just is rudimentary down there. It really is, and I can't put a finger on why, and I'm also not going to sit here and say the reason why is because they don't trust Mac to put more on Mac's play, because we're not talking about Mac. We're talking about creative wrinkles to get the ball into the end zone from the high red zone. Once they get into the 10 to 5 yard line, I'm perfectly fine with them putting Onwenu on the field and bullying the ball into
Sure.
the end zone. That's what they should be doing. But when you look at the high red zone from the 10 to the 19, their struggles in that area of the field it's not just this game. This game was a microcosm of their struggles all year long, ranking 26th in red zone offense this year, and it's only going to get worse after tonight. So you look at some of those things, and I think that's from a stylistic standpoint. I said 1 for 4. They were 2 for 4, but one of them was an interception, so you take points right off the board right there, right? So that gets you 0 in a red zone trip, and some of that's on Mac, right? He obviously throws the interception. It's not necessarily on McDaniels, but I would just like to see the red zone design basically right now, and I can't believe that teams are still getting beat by Hunter Henry down there, right? Because he's all they got.
I
He's
know.
the only consistent weapon they have in the red zone for Mac to go to right now.
Red zone, one thing, but let me ask you this: just this felt like this. I thought this was going to be a Mac throws at 30 plus time, times tonight by design, not because they were trailing and had to come up.
Right.
I just thought that that's what the Colts would give them, and that's what the Patriots would do. Also thinking that the Colts would expect the Patriots to try to establish a run, but the Pats were running out of strange formations. It felt like they were, with multiple receivers, they were running out of, multiple receiver sets instead of heavy packages. I would have thought it would have made more sense to either spread it out and go and loosen up the Colts a little bit, by letting Mac cook, so to speak. And we talk about it all the time. I thought that would be one option. I thought the other option would be do exactly what you did with the Bills and go heavy and throw in an extra tight end and just ram it down their throats for a little bit and see if you could soften them up some. They didn't do either of those things. And then obviously you run into that blocked punt, which again, we'll get into that in terms of why does that keep happening? It's the third of the season and no other team has more than one.
Yeah, we got to talk about that.
And that goes into a touchdown. We'll get into that in a minute. So you're instantly in a hole and you become one dimensional and everything gets a little bit more difficult. But I didn't understand what they were trying to accomplish offensively to start the game.
Yeah, the start of the game was ugly offensively from a lot of standpoints. I look at that fourth down play, for instance, at the Hunter Henry where they roll out the pocket. They've ran that same roll pick play a dozen times this year already on short yardage, third down, fourth down. Usually the sprint route that Hunter Henry ran is done by Jacoby Myers. So the one little wrinkle that they threw in there was that they had Hunter Henry run it this time instead of Jacoby.
Yeah.
But the Colts were all over it. They knew exactly what was coming on that fourth down. So building compliments off of that, doing something else different in that situation. And I have to go back and look at the tape. But from what I remember looking at it initially, it looked to me like they could have ran the ball pretty easily inside the tackles, inside the guards there on that one particular fourth down. I think they had the B gap uncovered, in terms of a guy on the line of scrimmage taking away the gap. So they easily could have ran the football there. I felt like they cut off half the field. It's not there initially because the Colts are ready for the pick play, and that comes back to, is that that's the only play in their bag, right? That the only play in their bag on 4th and 1 is the rollout, because I've seen them run it. It's got to be 8 to 10 times this year already in short yardage going back to week 1. So the only play that they have in that bag and 4th and 1 is that rollout play. Like, there's nothing else that they can run there. That's frustrating as well. So you look at some of those things, and I definitely feel that it wasn't McDaniels' best game. But you can also go back through a lot of these plays and talk about player execution, certainly in certain situations as well. It's not McDaniels' fault that Mac Jones throws the ball to Darius Leonard, right,
Yeah.
in the red zone. That's not on the offensive coordinator.
No, and it looked like he got baited into that pick back
Yeah,
there. And
that happens.
and it happens.
Yeah,
And that's like rookie-ish stuff,
right.
he got baited into that one and then just didn't see what just didn't see it clearly on the second one there. So those were bad. I mean, he looked like a rookie, which he does at times.
It was a seesaw game from him, but I will say this, and they didn't pull it off, so you can't go full Brady mode, right? But Brady would have some of those games too. I mean, we obviously point to some of the Super Bowls, and in the Falcons Super Bowl being probably the biggest example of this. But you had a lot of games over the course of 20 years where you don't look very good for 2.5 quarters. You don't look good for 3 quarters, but the quarterback rises in the end. Right. And he goes out there and he makes a hell of a fourth quarter comeback and puts it together and puts them over the top. They weren't able to pull it off here today, but you have to give Max some credit for what some of the plays that they made late in this game in the fourth quarter. He threw the ball exceptionally well. He did bring them almost all the way back, brought them into 20 to 17. They were in 3 points of bringing them all the way back, but they still, the start was the start. And I think when you look at what Bill Belichick said after the game, and what Matthew Slater said after the game, and a lot of other people that were up at the podium, was they're not going to win very many football games starting like that, right? And when you have 8 penalties and you have 2 turnovers and you have a block punt go for a touchdown and you have all these things in the beginning part of the game, and you get yourself into a 20-0 hole on the road, you are going to lose 99% of those games. So at the end of the day, there are some moral victories. There are some silver linings to this game. And I'm sure when we watch back the tape from Mac Jones's perspective in particular, he made some really good throws in this game, especially against some of their zone looks, moving the zone coverage, coming back to the backside, doing some things with Hunter Henry that I thought was really, really productive. Kendrick Bourne got involved. Jacoby Myers didn't have the best game, but he made some catches there on third down.
I mean, one of Mac's best throw possibly was that Jacoby drop
Yeah,
there in
the
the
fade.
first
Yeah.
half. Oh my goodness,
Yeah,
so
he did. So he did. It's a seesaw, right? I mean, it's a rookie seesaw. He
yeah.
made some really, really good plays. He also made some really, really bad ones, and those are the ebbs and flows that you're going to have with the
You know
rookie
what
quarterback.
though? Right. Here's the thing. It's a matter of perspective. Now you're in it. You'd won 7 games in a row and you started to get this sense of, oh my goodness, 1 seed by Super Bowl. Like, wow. And so the expectation
Right.
level changes. If you look at it through a different lens in terms of Mac Jones, you've had a couple of wins recently. And again, this is going to put the sunny, kind of a sunnier look on Mac's performance. But people, you've had wins recently where Mac looked like he'd either regressed or was a bit of a non-factor, and you wonder what happens when they get down. Can he make throws? This is something you needed to see if you're the Patriots and a Patriots fan, that yeah, he can make throws when he has to. And if you put the game in his hands, he's going to make some good decisions. He made a lot of good decisions in the second half, or, as they were trying to move. And you will lump in part of the third quarter there right before they scored their first touchdown there in the fourth. When they gave him the ball and they said go,
Yeah.
he made a ton of throws. So again, people have been begging to see that. At least you got to see a glimpse of it. What this does though is it screws you up in the AFC playoff picture. You really had to be perfect, because I don't see necessarily the Chiefs losing the rest of the way out. So that 1 seed is going to be really tough now. Now you got Buffalo next week, and you really have to get that,
Yeah,
get the W. Yeah.
the good news is that regardless of what happened this week, and I say this with a smile on my face because I think a lot of the Bills fans that I follow on Twitter tonight were taking some victory laps on the expense of the Patriots when it was 20-0. But regardless of the outcome of tonight's game, next week is a hat and t-shirt game for the Patriots if they win. They win the AFC East next week against Buffalo with a victory at Gillette Stadium, point blank, regardless of what happened tonight. So there's still a lot of positives to go from moving forward. But I thought Matthew Slater said it best. If they play like they did tonight, they are not going to win very many football games here down the stretch.